Now, comic books around the world are generally known to be entertaining, but our next guest this evening has written a brand new story in comic form which discusses a rather serious subject.
And we're thrilled here with us. Good evening, Benjamin Dix.
Good evening.
How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
now,
you.
comic books, they're generally very light-hearted. This is something completely different, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, the term comic book or comic refers to the medium rather than the actual content. So it's sequential art, telling a story through art. And the work that we do looks at human rights issues, it looks at predominantly conflict issues, but presents it instead of a text article, it presents it as a comic book.
Let's talk about this one that you've got now. It's called Almaz's Story, and it's about an Ethiopian maid working in Saudi Arabia. Tell us a bit more about this story.
Well, I met Alma, we changed all the names, so I met the real Almaz in Addis in Ethiopia in April this year at a woman's refuge. And I'd been taken there through friends, and I interviewed her about her life story of where she came from in the Bali mountains of Ethiopia, and a very impoverished family who went to the Middle East looking for work. When she was there, she got hugely exploited, sexual violence, the family didn't pay her, and finally she fell from a window. She wasn't sure if she fell or if she got pushed, but it was while she was having an argument with the mother of the family about her payment. 6 months of work and no pay. And she woke up 10 days later, crippled in her bed in the house. The family decided that she would be no longer used to them, so they drove her to the airport and sent her back to Addis. And I went to this women's refuge, which was full of women of this story, over 100 women.
That's right, and it's not just Ethiopia. This happens to women from across the world, right?
Yeah, I mean, since the story was published on the BBC on Monday night, I've been inundated with emails from women around the world saying, this is my story, I'm Almaz, I was working in Saudi or in Qatar or Bahrain, and I've experienced this.
And do you think you've got that positive response because of the way that you've put this together in a comic style form?
Yeah, I mean, I actually got the statistics back today from the BBC that it's just on the BBC alone, it's been viewed by over 500,000 people since Monday. And that's a lot of people to view a comic, but it's actually a huge amount of people to view a story about migrant labour. If you put up a story that's just a written article, it might get a few tens of thousands of hits. It won't get 500,000 hits. So the comic form, it's more approachable. People are reading about someone's daughter, someone's sister, not just about 10,000 maids. So what we try and do is humanise statistics, basically.
I think comics are quite intimate in the sense that when you're reading it, you're looking at it's your own personal time. You're spending from going from one picture to the next, reading it in your own sort of words. What's the response been like? Because the issue of migrant labour is quite an important and quite a sensitive one in the Middle East. What's the response been from Middle Eastern readers?
I'll probably answer that better next week because it's about to be republished in Arabic.
Oh wow!
So the BBC are republishing it at the moment, and they're translating
will probably
it.
Get huge impacts,
So at the moment, I've actually not received so much feedback from the Middle East, but I imagine next week I will. Yeah.
Now, Sheikh Abuka, your role as a sheikh, you come across many harrowing stories. How do you think something like this will benefit victims of issues like this?
I think it's it's at the heart of what it takes to be a human and part of humanity. That when you see something that is really bad, with the intention of minimizing the other people being victims of that, there is nothing wrong at all with that. And that's like, the story is not for someone who is part of it, but even for the person who is the culprits in that, the victim themselves and also other people, so that we know that when such kind of evil is being perpetuated somewhere in the world, it should be somehow go a long way being stopped. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that when you see something that is bad, then try not to stop it by any means. If you can talk about it, if you can stop it physically, or if you can't, you really feel that you are not part of that. And I think that is I would imagine I can see that message, being through, the kind of, publication of that kind of work. Sure.
Benjamin, the next story that you're working on is about Syria. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I'm based now in Istanbul, and I'm working with Syrian artists who were graphic artists in Damascus, and they've had to leave because of the conflict. And we're now collecting stories of Syrian refugees who are coming through Istanbul and trying to get to Europe through the smuggling routes across the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
So the story is actually, it's about the smuggling routes across the Mediterranean, of which many people from East Africa, North Africa,
Yeah.
Syrians are making these routes, and it's become very problematic and topical. But we're using the Syrian line as that. So I'm, daily interviewing Syrian refugees, getting their stories, and looking forward to publishing.
And how
that.
does it all come together? Because you write the story, and then you have to get someone to draw the pictures. And I imagine it's not just sitting down and doodling pictures. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of work, and I love the work. It's creative, but when we put out Almaz on Monday, you get this kind of global feedback, and it's totally worth it. But it is a huge amount of work. I have to go to the places, I interview, we then script, we make the storyboards, we draw it, and then what we do is we try and, before we ink the comics, we send the pencil sketches of the comics back to the person who we interviewed, and they get to edit it. So it really becomes their story, that we just direct it. And then we put it out there, and then we sit on sofas like this and talk about it, and it's the whole process.
Yeah.
And it's great. I really enjoy it.
Well, Benjamin, it's great to see the finished product.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to the release of the next one.
Yeah, pleasure.